To start off, I would like to say that this card game really exists, and it can be bought. You can decide for yourself if you want to believe that it is a theory and that we are all going to die, but you cannot deny that this card game cannot be coincidence. Now, before telling the entire story, you need to know what the Illuminati is. If you already know it, congratulations. But if you do not know, it is useful to listen. A short explanation of the Illuminati, also known as the New World Order, is that it is a conspiracy theory, beginning with the Mayans. You probably know about their prediction that the world would end in 2012. However, it did not. But a fifth major cycle ended in 2012, which meant a big change. Believers of the conspiracy theory say that the Illuminati started to rebuild the world in 2012. Their main goal was to reduce the world population and create a better world by doing so. Now that you know what the Illuminati is, I will explain yet another coincidence. Starting in 1995, Steven Jackson decided to make a new type of card game called Illuminati. When the game was completed, something weird happened. The American government tried to stop the game from being marketed. The reason never came out. But a few years later, things became very clear. Six years after the release of the card game, planes crashed into the World Trade Center as a result of a terrorist attack. Many people died. The card game exactly predicted this. Have a look at the cards yourself. Even the positioning is correct. Another terrorist attack that everyone remembers is the disaster at the Pentagon. The card game predicted that too. The BP oil spill? Yes. The game knew that would happen too. Have a look at their oil spill card. You can see the contaminated water, a sinking ship, and a bird that's dying because of the oil. Now, as well as the cards mentioned previously, these things happened and also reduced the world population. Perhaps the reason why the government didn't want it published. What about the rest of the game? What else does it predict to happen in the future? The end of the world? The game definitely raises questions. Of course, that's good for sales, but terrifying for anyone paying attention. The most terrifying and most remarkable cards are the ones that predict World War III, a rewriting history card, Illuminati University card, and the end of the world card. The World War III card says that there would be another world war, but in this one, nuclear weapons will be used. It sounds logical that if there would be another world war, those weapons would be used. There are more nuclear weapons now than we can even imagine. You can also find a card that says your goal is population reduction, and that, of course, is the Illuminati's goal. Under the picture, in the explanation of the card, it says, too many people making too many problems, and not enough love. The Illuminati sees the reduction as the solution for those problems. In Corona, California, there was once a road known by most locals as the Never-Ending Road. Specifically, the road's true name was Lester Road. Now, over 20 years later, the landscape of Corona has changed, and the Never-Ending Road is no more. However, years ago, Lester Road was an unlit road that people claimed became a never-ending road when driven at night. The people who made such a drive were never seen or heard from again. The legend became so well known that people refused to even drive Lester Road during the day. One night, like many teens my age, I drove up Lester Road, but only a short distance. And in my headlights, it did look like it went on forever. Frightened, I quickly turned around, because if I continued up the road, I thought I might never return again. Perpetuation of the legend convinced local law enforcement to investigate. Lester Road took a sharp left turn at its end, and there were no guardrails. Beyond the curve lay a canyon, and on the other side of the canyon was another road that lined up so well with Lester Road that when viewed from the correct angle, especially at night, the canyon vanished from sight, and the road seemed to continue on up and over the hill on the other side of the canyon. Upon investigation of the canyon, dozens of cars were found, fallen to their doom, with the decomposing bodies of the victims still strapped to their seats. You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes. They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. From what has been pieced together, The lost episode was written entirely by Matt Groening. During production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet, seemed nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present results in them getting very angry and forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt. I first heard of it at an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. The episode's production number was 7G06. The title was Dead Bart. The episode labeled 7G06, Moaning Lisa, was made later and given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who was on the show about this will cause them to do everything they can to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone as he was leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I had followed him. Probably expected a typical encounter with an obsessive fan. When I mentioned the lost episode, though, all color drained from his face, and he started trembling. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention this episode again. The piece of paper had a web address on it. I would rather not say what it was, for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address into my browser and came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text and a download link. I clicked on it, and a file started downloading. Once the file was downloaded, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I had ever seen. System restore didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open it on my now empty computer, and, as I suspected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. The episode started off like any other episode, but had very poor quality animation. If you've seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar, but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little off. Homer seemed angrier. Marge seemed depressed. Lisa seemed anxious, and Bart seemed to have genuine anger and hatred for his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart was fooling around, as you'd expect. However, as the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, Bart broke a window in the plane and was sucked out. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animated style of The Simpsons world represented life, and that death turned things more realistic. This was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it, not having to move, and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with the shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at their table crying. The crying went on and on. It got more pained and sounded more realistic. Better acting than you would think possible. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear murmuring in the background. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring. They looked like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them. There were faces looking in the window, flashing in and out, so you were never sure what they looked like. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a title card saying 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletally thin and still sitting at the table. There was no sign of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted, and as they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was just lying in front of his tombstone, looking like it just did at the end of Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually they stopped and just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to summaries, Homer tells a joke at this part, but it isn't audible in the version I saw. You can't tell what Homer is saying. The view zoomed out as the episode came to a close. The tombstones in the background had the names of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some that no one had heard of in 1989. Some that haven't been on the show yet. All had death dates on them. For guests who died, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image was the Simpson family on their couch, like in the intros, but all drawn in hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstones to predict the death of living Simpsons guest stars, but there's something odd about most of the ones who haven't died yet. All of their deaths are listed as the same date.